Godzilla is now in New York City.
Monster 01 and 02, commence the attack.
Hello, listeners, and welcome back to Stomp This Way. Andrew, how you doing?
I'm doing all right.
Yeah, it's been a couple weeks.
Yeah.
We went to a little thing called G-Fest
Ooh.
in Chicago, and we'll talk more about that at the end of this podcast. But we've got a movie to cover first. And Andrew, what movie is that?
The Thing from Another World.
Ooh, yes. Also sometimes simply referred to as The Thing. Yeah. Have you ever seen this movie before?
Yeah, and you know the answer to that.
Yes, you have.
Yes, I have.
I think both seen it, one time before?
Yeah.
Yeah, so revisiting, it's been several years though, revisiting it for the podcast. And yeah, excited about that. Also, I did revisit the novella that all these movies coming in the next 3 weeks are based off of. And that novella, of course, is Who Goes There?
Ooh.
By John W. Campbell Jr. But yeah, Andrew, we're gonna do a little Thing retrospective. Next 3 weeks will be movies about The Thing. I'm excited.
Wow.
Are you excited?
Oh, yeah.
Very exciting. Very exciting. But anyway, you want some production trivia?
Sure.
All right. Well, this movie is based off, as I said, novella by John W. Campbell Jr. called Who Goes There? It was published in the 1930s, I believe, the early 30s, maybe the late 30s. But anyway, Howard Hawks. Howard Hawks, of course, was a big name in classic Hollywood. He made movies like ones I've never watched before, but he did make, I think he made like the original Scarface, the 1930s version, not the one with, that we've watched. But he was a really big name in classic Hollywood, made a lot of big movies, and he bought the rights to this story for $1,250.
Wow.
And did you know that this is one of the first films to not list the cast in the opening?
Wow.
Yeah, I remember I probably got fined for it. I don't know. I remember reading that. You remember the first Star Wars movie? Of course, it doesn't have the cast at the beginning. It just has the credit, the scroll, right?
Yeah.
And George Lucas actually got fined by one of the unions, Directors Union, Guild, Actors Guild, or maybe Motion Picture Association. I don't remember who, but somebody fined him for not putting the actors' names at the front of the movie. So I'm sure this one was probably got fined too. But anyway, yeah, on location shooting occurred in Glacier National Park, and they also supplemented those with sets built at an LA ice storage plant. One of the first films to incorporate a full-body fire stunt. Somebody putting on a fire suit and getting caught on fire for a movie. The screenplay changes the nature of the alien from a shapeshifter to a very humanoid monster. Probably for budgetary reasons in the 1950s. I mean, even if they'd have had all the money in the world in 1950s with the technology available, they would have probably had trouble pulling off a convincing shape-shifting monster, or at least showing the shape-shifting. I guess you could have had it be a human, then had it glowing eyes or something, but and then cut away and it looked different. But
yeah.
Anyway, so they went away from that idea. But there's a lot of debate about this film, about who actually directed it. We've actually kind of got a Spielberg Toby Hooper situation, with Poltergeist, where, it's like a lot of people think that Spielberg really directed that movie, but they just slapped Hooper's name on it for contractual reasons or whatever. Kind of the same with this. A lot of people think that Howard Hawks, who is only the producer, it's Howard Hawks's The Thing from Another World, but the credited director is actually Christian Niebe. I guess that's how you say his name. And some say that Hawks directed it and they basically put Niebe's name on it so he would be able to get his Directors Guild membership. I guess they were friends, or really Niebe was a protege of Hawks, had worked under him for a long time. And even like the actors and things have differing stories about who actually did most of the directing and all this. Some say Niebe did direct it just with kind of under Hawks' tutelage on set, but I think, as we talked about the movies, Howard Hawks, if he didn't actually just straight out direct the movie, he definitely has a lot of influence on how the movie turned out. But another thing was that Hawks, apparently RKO paid its directors $50,000. Like, that was their director's fee. If you directed a movie for RKO Pictures, you got $50,000. Hawks only gave Niebe $5,460 of that and kept the rest for himself. So,
Wow.
Whatever. But in 2001, this film was selected for preservation in the U.S. National Film Registry. And on the AFI's 100 Years, 100 Thrills list, it was ranked number 87. So a well-regarded movie from the 50s, sci-fi film from the 50s. But Andrew, how did the box office do at the time?
Well, this released April 7th, 1951.
That's right.
Budget of 1.3 to 1.6 million.
That's right. I couldn't get an exact figure, but the websites I looked at was somewhere in that range.
It made 1.95 million in the U.S. theaters.
Yeah.
Rentals.
Well, back then, what they would basically how they counted the box office is because it wasn't like nowadays where like you get like wide distribution. Like, the studios are like, okay, well, my movie's going to come out and the movie's come out in 3,000 theaters or whatever. And basically the studios come in and say, hey, we're releasing this movie. And, if your theater wants to show it, you have to show it on this many screens, this many times a day. And basically the studios are dictating how the movies are distributed. Back in the day, they didn't release these nationwide, and they didn't, at least the way I understand it, they didn't really split ticket sales. Like nowadays, instead of like the theater just like renting the movie out and then, they get all the revenue for the tickets and the concessions and whatever. Nowadays, the theaters don't so much rent it out or purchase the movie to play it. They, like I said, the studio sends it out to all the theaters across the nation, and then they split the ticket sales. So like in the opening weekend, the distributor gets 80% of the revenue from ticket sales, and the theater chain gets to keep 20%, and then the theater chain, of course, keeps their concessions or whatever, which is why concessions are so expensive. And then as the weekends go on, that percentage, that ratio changes to where with each passing weekend, the studio keeps less of the percentage of the ticket revenue and the theater chain keeps more of it, blah, 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 blah. But anyway, so back in the day, how the studios accounted for what they made was that the theaters would rent out the movie from the studio for them to show it. So this made $1.95 million in theater rentals. So theaters across the nation paid $1.95 million to rent the movie from the studio so they could show it at their cinema.
Facts with Aaron Case.
Little history. I hope I get that mostly right. I haven't done a deep dive, but little history with the history of distribution of films across the U.S. Anyway, I'm sorry. Continue.
It was the 46th highest earning film of that year.
Right.
Highest earning science fiction film of the year.
Right. And see, that's another interesting thing, too, how times were different, where the top earning, at least, of course, according to Wikipedia or IMDb, wherever I got that from, where the highest earning sci-fi film was only the 46th highest grossing movie of the year. Really shows you, like, the difference in how studios and the public regarded science fiction films at that time versus, dramas or whatever. Like nowadays, all the big movies are either sci-fi, fantasy, whatever, But back then it was like most of the bigger movies were, Casablanca or or Citizen Kane, you know, just dramas.
Yeah.
Boring. I was kidding. Anyway, so but let's listen to a trailer for this movie, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about the cast and crew, and we'll talk about the plot summary, and we'll talk all about this first adaptation of Who Goes There, The Thing from Another World. So see you in a bit.
That thing's alive, sir. I saw it. I shot at it. I hit it. I know it. Nothing happened. It just kept coming at me, making a noise like a cat mewing. Captain, it was awful. If you could have seen those hands and those eyes. Captain, you've got to do something about it. You've got.
Is it human or inhuman? Earthly or unearthly? Baffling questions, astounding questions that not even the world's greatest scientific minds can answer.
Gentlemen, do you realize what we've found? A being from another world, as different from us as one pole from the other. If we can only communicate with it.
See? What happened, Doctor?
In the greenhouse, I was working. I couldn't see.
Yeah.
Then a blast of cold air, and I heard Olson scream.
Come here. Get in the corner. Now hold this in front of you. Stay by the light switch.
1.9. Needles hit the top.
You know, RKO Pictures should have fired their marketing department. That was one of the most boring trailers I think I've ever seen. But anyway, Andrew, you ready for the cast and the crew?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, this was directed by Christian Neebe, or was it? Written by Charles Lederer, and then had several uncredited writers, including Howard Hawks himself. Based on Who Goes There by John W. Campbell Jr., music by Dimitri Tiomkin, effects by Donald Stewart, and starring Margaret Sheridan, Kenneth Tobey, Robert Cornthwaite, Douglas Spencer, James Young, Dewey Martin, Robert Nichols, and James Arness as the Thing.
Ooh.
Anyway, the plot is more or less as follows. While stationed in Alaska, Air Force Captain Pat Hendry is summoned to the Arctic after an expedition reports the crash of a mysterious aircraft near the North Pole. Accompanied by journalist Ned Scott and several military personnel, Hendry flies to the remote research station to investigate. Upon arriving, Hendry and members of the expedition travel to the crash site, where they discover a flying saucer buried beneath the ice. Attempting to free it with thermite charges, they accidentally destroy the craft. Nearby, however, they uncover the frozen body of an extraterrestrial, which they excavate and transport back to the base for study. At the station, Hendry immediately clashes with the expedition's lead scientist, Dr. Carrington. Carrington insists on thawing the alien for a scientific examination, while Hendry orders that it remain frozen until he receives official instructions. Hendry prevails, but later that night, a guard inadvertently places an electric blanket over the ice block, melting it. The revived alien attacks, and although the startled guard fires at it, the creature escapes into the Arctic wilderness. Outside, the alien attacks the station's sled dogs before fleeing, leaving behind one of its severed arms. Carrington studies the limb and discovers that the creature is composed of plant matter rather than flesh and blood. Fascinated, he becomes convinced the being possesses a vastly superior intelligence and argues that it should be studied and communicated with. Hendry and the military personnel, however, believe it is too dangerous to be left alive. The search for the creature leads the group to the station's greenhouse, where they initially find nothing unusual. After noticing signs that the exterior door had been opened, Carrington and his fellow scientists investigate further and discover one of the sled dogs drained completely of blood. They conclude that the alien survives by feeding on blood, prompting Carrington to secretly organize a rotating watch in hopes of making peaceful contact with the creature. The plan ends in disaster when one of the guards is found gravely injured, claiming the alien killed two of his fellow watchmen. Hendry leads his men back to the greenhouse, where they confront the creature and successfully trap it inside. Believing Carrington's obsession has endangered everyone, Hendry orders the scientist confined to his quarters. Ignoring those orders, Carrington secretly cultivates alien seedlings in his laboratory, using the station's emergency blood supply to grow new life forms. Meanwhile, the creature escapes the greenhouse and attacks the airmen. They drive it back by dousing it with kerosene and setting it ablaze, forcing it to retreat into the freezing wilderness. Before long, the alien sabotages the station's furnace, threatening everyone inside. Hendry orders the survivors together in the generator room while his men rig an electrical trap. When the creature launches its final assault, Carrington attempts to intervene but is tossed aside. Hendry gives the order and the alien is electrocuted to death. In the aftermath, Hendry resumes his romance with Carrington's secretary Nikki, while Scott finally succeeds in broadcasting his story to the world. He ends his report with the now famous warning, "Watch the skies," as credits roll. More or less.
More or less.
More or less the plot of the movie.
All I'm saying is, how hot was that electric blanket that it melted that in mere seconds?
Well, yeah, I mean, it did happen pretty quick. I mean, I think that ice would probably melt pretty fast if you put an electric heated blanket on it, but yeah.
That was really
I was surprised they had electric blankets in the 1950s. I was like, wow, those have been around that long? But yeah. But anyway, yeah, so the story is going to open in Alaska, in Anchorage, Alaska. Now, they obviously, whoever made this movie, I don't think has spent much time in Alaska. Anchorage typically doesn't have the severe extreme weather that they depict in this opening with like 40 below and giant, 6-foot snowbanks. That's, they probably should have said that in Fairbanks, not Anchorage. Anchorage is a bit more temperate, but whatever, close enough. But it's immediately going to be a change from the story, both the original novella and then, of course, the more famous Carpenter adaptation that we'll review next week. Those stories, right, are set in Antarctica, the South Pole. This movie is going to be set in the Arctic, the North Pole, right, which departs from the original story. And I think I know the reason for that, but I'll get into that a little bit later. But essentially, we're going to be introduced to some of our main, really two of our main characters here. Pat Hendry. His name is not Henry. It is Hendry with a D in there. But he is an Air Force captain. And this reporter guy, journalist guy, Ned Scott, is rolling up into this military camp and looking for a story. I guess he just wanders around military bases until someone gives him a story that he can write for his paper. But he's rolled up into this. That
seems like a costly endeavor.
Well, it was pre-internet, pre-cell phone. Journalists had to work for their stories, damn it. And he's on the hunt, on the prowl. But anyway, and he's really just right place, right time, because this admiral, is he Admiral or General Fogarty or whatever his name is going to tell Hendry that there's been a reported crash of an unidentified object near this North Pole expedition, basically. And he's ordered Hendry to go, and Hendry's like, "Can this journalist tag along?" And Fogarty's like, "Yeah, whatever." Which I don't think would ever happen, but okay. It
was different back then.
It was a different era. Actually, if anything, back then they would have been more secretive because they were in the middle of the Cold War, which I guess I'll just go ahead and say now why I think they relocated the story. This movie, the original story, I think, was about a shape-shifting alien, and you could kind of take wherever, whatever you think that might have been a metaphor for the, the story came out in, I think, 38, sometime in the 30s, really, before the Cold War. So at the time the story was published, I think, fascism would have been the more pressing concern than communism. Maybe the story was a metaphor for how the fascists live among us and can shapeshift and be just like us or whatever. But in the 1950s, where you were definitely right in the middle of the Cold War. So I think this movie is definitely, like many sci-fi movies of the time, we've talked about it before, a metaphor for the Cold War, for communists. And so instead of setting this in the South Pole, we're going to relocate this to the Arctic where, the Cold War was a concern. Alaska, of course, nearly borders, well, there's sea in between, but is the closest point to Russia, right, from the U.S. And of course, the Arctic and then the North Pole is pretty close to all that. So we are going to set this story here, and this is going to be essentially about, I think if you want to read into it, communists invading the U.S. Whatever.
Communism.
But, and I think, we'll get to it. Of course, I think the most famous part of this particular adaptation of this story is the ending that's kind of made it into pop culture, where the journalist says, watch the skies, watch everything. And it's kind of a metaphor for, telling people, watch your surroundings. There could be a communist among you. But anyway.
They're always watching.
But so anyway, Hendry's going to go up to this expedition, and they find some, there's some magnetic interference or whatever on the way up there, and they land, and we're pretty quick. It's a short movie. It's 86 minutes, 87 minutes, somewhere in there. So they're pretty quickly. He's going to land. He's going to talk with, I think the radio guy's name is Tex, and he's going to talk with Tex, and they're going to talk with the scientist guy, Carrington, who's going to be a major part of this.
Yeah.
And they're going to load up, and they're going to fly out to the crash site. And again, I think a pretty infamous scene. Maybe if no other reason, because of Halloween, they basically play this scene on in the background on TV and Carpenter's Halloween.
Yeah.
Where they go up and they find the crash site, and they can see where it like skidded and then like came to a halt and melted the ice, and then the ice refroze over on top of it or whatever. And they all have the famous scene where they all get in a big circle and stand around it, to see if they can find the outline of the ship and see how big it is. And they realize it's a circle. It's a flying saucer. And
it's a perfect circle.
The little fin sticking out of the top of the
ice.
Even though if it's a perfect circle, I don't even really know what the fin's purpose is, but whatever. Anyway, so and their first idea to get it out of the ice is let's use thermite bombs, and of course,
and and they place it nowhere else but right next to the fin, like right against.
Which I will say, this scene in particular is probably the scene most directly taken out of the novella, because there was a whole thing in the novella about, let's melt it with thermite bombs.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they portray it perfectly, but basically, and they explain it in the novella, what they didn't realize is that whatever weird metal the ship is made out of is actually flammable. Whoopsie.
Yeah.
And the thermite bombs, of course, blow up the ship. And it's like, oh, well, there goes the scientific discovery of the century. Whoopsies. And but lucky for them, one of the aliens was either tossed out of the vehicle upon crashing, or it crawled out, or whatever.
Yeah.
And it was frozen a little bit a ways from the ship. So they luckily don't use thermite to try to get him out. They're like, let's just cut the block of ice out and we'll take it back to base.
Yeah.
And so, and again, this whole thing about taking the alien back to base in the block of ice, and then arguing about, it thawing out and people having to watch over it and be scared of it is largely taken from the novella. But because they take away the shape-shifting aspect of the alien, right, we're pretty much going to rob the movie of any of the paranoia, like such a fundamental part of the novella and of Carpenter's version is the paranoia. You don't know who is an alien.
You don't know who to trust.
Yeah, they don't. The characters don't know who the alien is. They don't know who they can trust, and it really, is such a core part of the story. Well, they take away the shape-shifting part. Again, I think largely because of budgetary reasons. They didn't know how they could,
physically do it.
Yeah, convincingly pull that off with the technology and the money that they had. So they basically, It is a big knock on this version. They basically turned it into a humanoid vegetable zombie or something.
Yeah. That's how he grew his limbs. Or
Yeah.
Something.
And okay, humanoid vegetable vampire zombie is kind of what it is. But anyway, but what they're gonna try to make up with it, what the point I was trying to make is, they do introduce this element of distrust. You have basically two camps. You have the military personnel led by Hendry, who's basically taken over the base camp because they've made this big discovery. And then you have the science team, right? Kind of, I guess Carrington is basically the lead scientist. There's this other guy who acts, I don't know. I kind of got confused about whose role was what, but Carrington, who basically acts as the lead scientist, and he and Hendry are going to be at odds for most of this movie because Carrington immediately becomes obsessed with this alien and convinced that it's like a superior intelligence and they must communicate with it, and even kind of goes bonkers midway through the movie. Is like, even if it kills us all, we have a responsibility to let the alien live or whatever. It's like, okay, you're
a little crazy.
bit cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. And I think it was a reflection of the time. I think, one of the elements of this movie is this is post the Manhattan Project, post the dropping of the bombs. And I think, even in, America, there was kind of this fear of the nuclear bomb and fear of scientists, because scientists had created this, bomb, this thing that could destroy humanity, wipe out thousands of people in an instant.
Yeah.
And so I think you kind of see that reflected in this movie, where the scientists are going to be the kind of cuckoo crazy ones who want to save this alien, even though it could wipe out all of humanity. It's like, whatever. And the military is actually kind of portrayed as, again, and this is pretty common in movies at the time, the military is portrayed as the heroes. Again, and patriotism and support for the military. We're coming off of World War II, where we had won the Great World War, and people were really high on the military. But anyway, that is a dynamic in this movie. And I think it's an interesting dynamic. Obviously, not nearly as great as what you have in the original novella or Carpenter's adaptation with the paranoia, which is, and we'll get to it next week, which is so amazingly adapted by Carpenter and his version. But anyway, so we're going to get into the movie where they leave this one guy on watch to watch the block of ice, because they had rolled it into the storage room, and you pointed out it was kind of funny where the storage room is, of course, above freezing, and Carrington's like, we're gonna melt the ice, and Hendry's like, oh hell no, and he's like, break the window. And so they let the cold in and you were like, I think just ruin all of their foods, whatever they had stored in the storage room. I hope it wasn't sensitive to the temperature, because it's all ruined now.
Temperature change,
but that was kind of funny. But anyway, this complete idiot moron, I don't know what he was thinking. I don't know if he didn't realize that the blanket was electrical or plugged in or what. But he throws this heated blanket on top of it because he doesn't want to look at the monster, because it is slowly melting anyway. But anyway, then it melts it, like you said, basically instantaneously. And didn't short circuit the heated blanket or anything, which, okay, whatever. You think there'd be a lot of water.
Yeah.
But it is also funny that immediately this guy sees which the audience doesn't see it yet. You just see the shadow kind of rise up. And the first instinct of this soldier is just to turn around and start spraying bullets. He's like, oh my God.
Alien.
And then he runs away. And that was kind of entertaining. But anyway.
No wonder the alien didn't like
him. I mean, no wonder the alien's hostile. It immediately got sprayed with bullets. But anyway, the alien goes outside. The army man goes and tells Hendry and the others, and the alien goes outside, and they look out the window and see it fighting the sled dogs. And it was kind of a cool shot. You just see the dogs it's just like snow, and then the dogs just wake up and unbury themselves. And that is kind of life. I've been up to, not in the dead of winter, but I've been to inside the Arctic Circle in Alaska and Fort Yukon, and they do just literally chain their dogs up outside to the elements. It's just that's what they do. But the dogs just wake up and shake the snow off, and then and that was a big part of even the novella. And of course, there's a very famous scene with dogs in Carpenter's version where the alien first had to basically like fight the, deal with the dogs because the dogs could tell what it was. But he gets into a wrestling match with the dogs and kills some of them, but one of them rips its arm off. And Carrington's going to get a hold of the arm, and it's going to basically discover that it's not flesh and blood. It's basically, like we said, a plant. It's a walking carrot.
Yeah.
Basically. And but it's super smart and, all that. So there's that. And, they're going to get into some more arguments about how they should handle it.
For a smart alien, he's not really that smart.
No, he's not really that smart. He basically seems like a Frankenstein creature.
Yeah.
In fact, kind of looks Frankensteinish, although we never get a close-up shot, but we'll talk about that later. But And I will say, the biggest weakness of this movie, well, aside from the whole stripping it of the paranoia like I've talked about, if you're gonna make the alien like not a shapeshifter and just make it like this walking, Frankenstein creature, well, the least you could do is like give us a lot of the alien. But I don't think they were too proud of the alien. No. And this alien has like got like what 2 minutes of screen time in an 87-minute feature.
Barely.
And, yeah. And anyway, they're gonna walk around for a little bit. But I do think one of my favorite shots of the movie is they're gonna. Well, first of all, they go to the green room and the greenhouse. And they don't find anything in the greenhouse, but Carrington notices, and he waits for the army men to leave before he points it out.
Yeah.
That some of the plants are dead. It looks like they had been exposed to the cold, so the door must have been open from the outside, the door that leads to the outside.
And, why do they have a door to the outside in the place they don't want to get cold?
I don't know. Maybe it's fire code. They have to have an exterior escape. I don't know. But I do love the shot where like they open the cabinet or whatever and the dead dog comes tumbling out. And it's kind of a, especially again, keeping in context. So this is from 1951. I mean, this is an early 50s movie. Just that dead dog like rolling out with the musical sting was kind of, surprising. And I did remember this scene from the movie because it kind of stays with you. But this is where they discover that it sucks the blood. And I think they had even talked about it earlier when they had the hand, but it's a vampire, basically. Like it needs human plasma or some kind of plasma from living animals to survive. So it's in danger. Like Carrington knows. That's the thing. Carrington knows that it's dangerous to everyone on this base, but he is so obsessed with communicating with it, like he doesn't care. But he's going to set up a rotating watch of his loyal scientists to keep watch. And then later, we don't get to see it, which is one of the tragedies. I wanted to see this scene where the guy comes running back into the base and he's like, the alien showed up and it hung the two other guys upside down and like slit their throats like a freaking predator. And anyway, but we don't see that. But I do also love one of my favorite scenes is like Henry and the other guys go back to the greenhouse and Henry just like opens the door and the monster's hand there goes and swipes at him and then they close the door and then they just like barricade it in
they
the greenhouse.
Barricade that door.
But and then him and Carrington get into it and he basically like sends Carrington to his quarters because he's like, you didn't tell us that the thing was there, but whatever.
Yeah.
And so then, there's going to be some plotting and scheming and Carrington's going to like set up his own little greenhouse
in his laboratory.
Yeah, take their blood reserves for, if they need emergency blood transfusions or whatever and uses it to like start like cultivating little aliens. And they have the shot of like the little seedlings coming up and they're kind of pulsating like they're breathing or whatever.
Yeah.
It's kind of neat. But whatever do they burn his laboratory before they deal with the creature or after? I didn't remember. But at some point they don't show up. But at some point the military men do mention that they burned his laboratory, so that didn't come back. But it would be a cool stinger if they just showed like like a movies like back then they did this a lot where they would just show like the last shot would be like one of the plants survived and was still pulsing or something. But if they wanted to make a sequel, that's what they could have done. But anyway, one character I didn't really talk about in my plot summary and I haven't talked about yet, but is top billed in this movie over the guy that played Hendry or anybody else was Margaret Sheridan as this Nikki chick.
Yeah.
She's one of 2 women, I think, here at this base, which again, a change from the novella or Carpenter's version. You know, both of those versions, these were all men on these expeditions, but this movie is going to make it more of a co-ed expedition. But Nikki, who is one of Hendry's old flings, and there's some really weird flirting scenes with them where he shows up to her and, you know, they're talking about it, and they say something about she wrote a letter that everybody read that embarrassed him. I don't know what the letter said. And then later, before crap hits the fan, we cut to their room and she's got him like his hands tied behind him to a computer chair or a desk chair. And I'm not really sure what kind of game they were playing, but whatever. And then of course he like unties himself and blah, blah, blah. I guess it's supposed to be romantic. I don't really know. I don't the whole thing. She looks significantly younger than him, and the whole thing just felt kind of weird. But which is again pretty common in these old movies. But anyway, but Nikki, she's basically the secretary for Carrington. She just takes all of his notes as he talks.
Yeah,
and she's gonna rat out Carrington about like the little greenhouse experiment thing.
Yeah,
and Hendry's gonna storm in there and be all mad about it. Blah blah blah. But anyway, eventually, the alien, I guess, figures out that he can go out the other door in the greenhouse and escapes. And they've got this thing rigged up. They've got a Geiger counter. And basically, you know, the alien is radioactive or something.
Yeah.
You know, kind of, I think James Cameron may have borrowed this idea a little bit for his Aliens movie. Or Ridley Scott borrowed it first, I guess, for the first Alien, where, you know, the faster the thing beeps, the closer the alien is.
Yeah.
And there's another great scene where they're in their little like living quarters and the Geiger counter starts going off and the thing just like busts in the door.
Yeah.
And their immediate reaction is to like throw kerosene on it and light it on fire, and they catch their own living quarters on fire.
Oh yeah, they're like, we lost one room.
Which is the scene, I guess, the first time that a full bodysuit, like flammable, fire retardant bodysuit, had been used in a movie, because the guy catches on. James Ardeen, or whatever his name was, James Arness, was caught, set afire, and he goes running out into the snow or whatever.
Yeah.
And they put it out, and that was kind of funny. But and then they had to use the fire extinguishers to not burn the base down. But yeah, so they do that thing.
They're like, we lost. Let's not do that again.
Let's not do that again. But then eventually the monster does wisen up, and it like cuts off the oil supply to the furnace, right?
Yeah.
And of course it's 60 below outside, so without the furnace running, they're gonna freeze to death. So Henry orders everyone to the generator room because I guess it's warmer in there.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, what if he cuts power to the generator? But it never does. But they're like, let's rig up they're going to rig up like these electrical.
Well, no, they were worried about him cutting the power to a place, but the generator was on his own power system.
Okay, yeah, you're right. But they're going to rig up this electrical trap where basically they're going to rig the floor with these electrical wires.
Yeah.
And make him walk on the walking path and fry it. And it is funny because they like have barricaded the doors to the outside. And of course, Carrington's protesting, but they barricaded the door to the outside. And then when it finally decides to attack, it like opens the door and the door opens outward.
Yeah.
Like, what was the point of all the barricades?
Barricading?
If the door opened the other way, he could just open
the door and just smack the barricade out of the way.
That was funny. That was pretty good. But
somebody didn't think that through.
So they didn't think that through. He's walking, and of course Carrington at one point tries to shut off the generator, and then I couldn't even really tell what happened. The other guy runs in there and like tries to tackle him or something, and then Carrington like runs out.
Carrington had a gun.
Yeah, he had a gun.
And the other guy, and one of the people that was behind him, tackles them, and I guess they turn the act on the generator.
Yeah, it was that
scene was a little confusing.
That scene was it was edited weird, but anyway, they're trying to, because there's like a walkway like that they have in the thing, but then on each side is like dirt, and they're trying to get the monster on the walkway. And so they throw something at its feet, and it jumps onto the walkway. But anyway, at one point, Carrington comes barreling over and like gets onto the walkway with it and is trying to like communicate with it. But it's a lot like that scene. Was it again Ridley Scott maybe borrowed from this? Where was it in Prometheus where the old man Guy Pearce was like trying to talk to
the Promethean,
the what do they call it, the founder or whatever they called it, and the engineers, that's what they call them. Engineers. Talking to the engineer, and it just like batted him away. A lot like maybe borrowed from this scene where the alien just does not give a crap and just bats Carrington away. And
well, you know, he was portrayed a lot better at being smart than that movie though.
Oh yeah, the engineers in Ridley Scott's movie, where the intelligence was better portrayed, conveyed. It also inadvertently like saved Carrington's life because it bats him off the walkway that's electrocuted.
Yeah, that's true.
And as when it gets close enough, they turn on the thing and it electrocutes it and basically turns it into a pile of ash. And the day is saved.
That's what happens to plants when you burn them.
I guess. And there's some dialogue about they torched Carrington's lab or whatever, and all this, and then they all pile into the radio room, and again, kind of the infamous ending. There's some dialogue where they're like, making fun of Hendry and Nikki, and like they talk about getting married or something. And, nobody really cares. But Ned Scott gets on that radio and is like, gives this whole thing about watch the skies and blah, blah, blah. And the end.
The end.
Yeah. Again, I will say the first time I remember being kind of disappointed in this movie the first time I watched it. And I think, again, because you can't not compare it to John Carpenter's version, right? Because that's a remake of this movie based on the same story. I mean, Carpenter even kept the famous title card from this movie where it just like burns the thing into the screen or whatever, which is such a classic thing. I don't even know really why they added the subtitle From Another World onto this movie, because I think you could have just had the thing and it would have sufficed. But maybe back in the 50s, they wanted to really assure the audience it was a movie about an alien or something. But
From Another World.
From Another World. Watching it this time, though, I mean, yes, the monster stuff is not very good. I mean, they changed it from the shape-shifting thing, which, again, provided so much to the story, the original story, and to later adaptions. And even when you see the monster, like, it's not that impressive. It's just
not
a
that
guy
impressive.
in like a Frankenstein costume, basically. And
he's just a guy.
He's barely on screen. Like I said, I didn't count up the screen time, but literally probably like 2 minutes of screen time in an 87-minute movie. Not much more than that, if any. One thing I did like about this movie, and from what I've read, this is really a big Howard Hawks-ism. It makes one of the reasons that you think Howard Hawks definitely had some influence on this movie behind the camera, is, like so many of the old school sci-fi movies of this era, the dialogue is very stilted. Everyone speaks like one at a time, usually very slowly, I guess, to make sure that the audience is keeping up with all the sci-fi mumbo jumbo and stuff.
Yeah.
But one thing I liked about this movie is the dialogue is very like much more what I would call natural and witty. Like there's just a bunch of characters. They're talking over each other all the time, just like you would have if you had a bunch of like young military guys like bantering back and forth. And a lot of times the dialogue is pretty witty, especially with like the Ned Scott, the journalist character.
Yeah.
His little off comments when he's upset about not being able to tell his story and stuff.
Yeah.
And that is from Howard Hawks. A lot of the Howard Hawks movies of his big movies that won awards and things, this was his type of dialogue where he would have characters stumbling over each other and be very witty and just like quick dialogue, fast-paced dialogue. And it makes the movie feel a lot more modern than a lot of these other sci-fi movies.
Yeah, it's like
were felt very stilted and
one person talks.
Yeah, you just have one person, like they're one shot and they're just like talking and cutting back and forth, and it makes the movie, like I said, feel a lot more modern, a lot more sleek, and it makes the banter feel a lot more natural than you would usually get from these things. And I did kind of get like, not that the characters are not, none of the characters are like great. Like you don't get like a lot of in-depth characters with character arcs and all that kind of stuff.
No.
But the fact that they're talking like that and their banter is pretty lively, I think helps me get through the movie, even though most of it there's no alien on screen. But I did appreciate that. But yeah, I mean, even at 87 minutes, the pacing is kind of arduous because, like I said, they just didn't want to show the monster, and
It didn't look that good.
and you know, and we're a little bit outside of our usual wheelhouse. You know, and I know we've broken the rules a lot by this point. I try to keep it to some kind of giant monster. This is literally just like a very traditional, like 50 sci-fi
monster movie.
you know, alien flick.
Yeah.
Little green man, not so little, but little green man
Yeah.
movie. Now, of course, the reason I included this movie is because I'm a completionist, and if we're gonna do the Thing movies, we're gonna do all of them. I think Carpenter's version and the 2011 remake prequel Thing
Yeah.
is much more monstrous, obviously. And I think it's closer to what we do on this podcast. But yeah, and some other things I did appreciate about this movie is I think it probably was kind of scary. I mean, you got to, again, take that this came out in 1951, so well before, like, you know, modern horror movies or anything resembling like modern horror movies. They've got a couple of like decent jump scares, again, in context for the time. Like, I think audiences would have probably kind of jumped, like the musical sting when they open the cabinet and the dead dog rolls out. I mean, that's kind of a shocking scene for a movie from the 50s. And it's not a terrible looking dead dog. I mean,
No,
it
it's
looks
not
relatively
terrible.
realistic for whatever it was. The scene, and they're funny now, but it might have been a kind of a jump back in the day when, like, they first opened the greenhouse door and the monster's just standing there behind it, or when it busts into the living quarters and does that whole routine.
Wow.
Yeah, those scenes I thought were kind of entertaining. I did love that kind of stuff. But
It was
yeah,
a different time back in the day.
it was a different time. But yeah, so anyway,
Before Terrifier.
yeah, if you took Terrifier and put it in
In the
like
50s.
had froze somebody in 1951 and then unfroze them, and the first movie you showed them was Terrifier, they'd probably have a stroke. Be quite a shock to the system.
Quite a shock.
But anyway, you want to do some creature design?
Sure.
Well, one thing, and they've said this as much, they have said in interviews and things, I think, that there is, if you notice in this movie, there was no real close-up shot of the monster. Now, there is, like, on the cover, the poster does have kind of a close-up of the monster and, you know, its hands raised and stuff. And you can see Arness, like, in the makeup. But Hawks did not think that this makeup would hold up upon scrutiny. So they never did a close-up shot of the alien. So you never really see it up close or its face in close-up.
No.
It just kind of looks like a guy in kind of, you know, like I said, kind of Frankensteinish a little bit makeup. He's got like long fingers they've put on him, and he's kind of got a bulbous head, bald head that they've put on him, and, you know, taking away his like facial hair and eyebrows and all of that. But nothing too special or, you know, exceptionally scary or anything.
Hawk's like, no, that's not good.
Yeah, he doesn't talk or anything. He just kind of grunts and growls and roars and all
Which
that kind
you
of
would
stuff.
not think an intelligent being would be like just grunting.
Yeah. Well, you know, how does it talk? Maybe it communicates telepathically for all we know. But that was kind of a thing in the novella, and I don't think it's even really brought in the Carpenter version, but the monster in the novella would kind of, it did have kind of a telepathic element where it would give people intentionally like give people nightmares and make them dream things. But, you know, this movie, I didn't really talk about its similarities to the novella because it is so much different. I think I'll talk a lot more about the novella in Carpenter's version, which is a lot closer to what what Campbell was trying to do. This movie, like I said, they definitely take scenes from the novella. The whole thing when they're uncovering the ship is almost straight from the novella. The scenes of like the thing being trapped in the ice cube and melting is straight from the novella. The stuff with the fact that the dogs interact with it, although it happens a lot differently, is from the novella. But pretty much everything else is is changed because they fundamentally changed the story because, like I said, the shape shifting.
Did they have the blood test in the novella?
Yeah, not in this movie, and we'll talk about it next week. But there was some sort of blood test. Yeah, Carpenter did take that from the novella. But anyway, back to this creature design. So yeah, creature not anything special.
No.
Getting into effects, they said they did shoot some on location at Glacier National Park. Now, to me, most of the movie looks like it was filmed on a set.
Oh yeah, especially the interior, all the interior stuff.
Well, I mean, yeah, of course the interior stuff, but even the exterior shots, most of it looks. I mean, there were probably some wide shots they shot at Glacier National Park, but for the most part, it looks like they're on a set with the sky.
Maybe the walking through the ice part was
some of it, but a lot of it looks like they were on a set with the sky painted on behind them and fake. Probably asbestos as snow on the ground. But it doesn't look terrible, even when they're filming on a set. I mean, you can tell it's a set, but it doesn't look absolutely terrible. And probably the black and white nature of the movie helps that because they're in an Arctic area, it's black and white. You can't tell that the snow is super fake and all of that. And then, like you said, the interior sets, the interior sets are fine. It looks like kind of what like a small Arctic camp would look like.
Yeah.
And so that stuff works fine. I mean, the electricity effects at the end are kind of dated, old school, but it works fine. They do set some stuff on fire, wasn't it? I do appreciate again that they put the guy in the fire suit and set him on fire.
Just throwing kerosene at him.
Throwing kerosene at him. That was
that could have ended up really bad for them because they could have caught the stream and straight back up into the
it could have blown up in their face. Yeah, that would have been bad. So that was fine, but I don't know. I mean, the movie looks fine. It doesn't look, there's nothing that looks like so terrible that it just like yanks you out of the movie. I don't think if you're used to like these old school sci-fi movies, but like I said, the dead dog looked pretty convincing, I thought, and that kind of stuff. But yeah. And then score, I mean, pretty conventional
sci-fi score,
50s era sci-fi monster movie score. I don't think it's anything particularly memorable or anything.
This probably cost a lot more than the usual B movie.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't have a bad budget. Like 1951, somewhere between $1.25 million, maybe $1.5 million. So not the lowest budget. And again, Howard Hawks had a lot of pull in Hollywood. At this time, so he could command that kind of money for a low, B picture. But I did love though the musical sting at the beginning where the music is just like Christian doing as the thing is being like they literally like burnt like to do the opening sequence. They didn't have CGI and all that. They had to like burn it into the like this black background. The thing did it torch it into the background to do the opening credit sequence, which is pretty cool. But anyway, you ready for some final thoughts?
Sure.
All right, why don't you go for it?
Well, this movie, it's decent. It's pretty good. It's not my favorite. The Thing.
It's not my favorite thing. Get it?
But it's not bad. It's decent for the time it was made in.
Yeah.
Even though it doesn't have a shape-shifting alien.
Right.
Which, is the whole point of the whole.
Is like a major point of the novella, and it's weird that you would adapt it and take that away.
Take the whole point of it away and be like, blood-sucking plant alien.
Yeah. Yeah.
How they came up with that, who knows?
Yeah.
But the acting in it, it's better than you would usually see in a 50s B movie sci-fi thing. Like you've said, it's usually just one person talking at a time with a small cast.
Yeah.
And then it's not very good. They usually did not turn out very good in the 50s.
No.
But, some of them were good like this one. And the score was all right. The alien was there. Didn't show them much. They weren't proud of them.
Yeah.
But I'll give this movie, I'll give it a B plus.
Okay. Yeah, listen, to me, like, again, this movie I feel like is very well regarded. It's in the National Film Registry, thought very highly of by the American Film Institute. You go on Rotten Tomatoes, it has like a certified fresh 87%. score or something. Like, this is really thought of, I think, as one of the great 50s era sci-fi movies. To me, it doesn't really, at the end of the day, transcend the tropes of the era. I think it's a movie still very much stuck in the 50s and all the trappings that came with that. Again, it's a Cold War parable like all of these were.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't really have the budget or the means to pull off a good alien, and you can really see that in the way that they basically just avoid having the alien on screen, fundamentally changing the nature of the alien from the story. There's no real deep character explorations or anything like that. Now, like I did talk about, I do think it is unique in the way that Howard Hawks, as an uncredited writer, has really like brought this dialogue out. It's very fast paced, people talking over each other, very witty, makes it feel a lot more modern than a lot of those other 50s era sci-fi movies. And I do think, you know, they have that element of the scientists versus the military, which is kind of interesting. And I think an interesting reflection of the time of how people thought about how really society at large, you know, had a pretty positive view of the military, while also at the same time having a distrustful view of scientists over the whole nuclear bomb, even though the military industrial complex and science are really intertwined in that whole deal. And it's kind of interesting seeing how the American psyche kind of separated the two. But like I said, I still think it's a movie trapped in its era. But it's you know, I love old 50s sci-fi and monster flicks. So that's not, I'm not condemning it for that. I think it's above average in that sense. I don't think I'm going to be as kind as you were to it. I'm going to give it like a C+, because especially when you compare it to what could have been done with the story. When we get to Carpenter's version, we've seen what the story could be, and it's one of the greatest movies ever made, just to spoil my thoughts for next week.
Yeah.
It is a letdown in that sense. I will say, and I think I'll talk about it more next week, and I can't remember his name, but the edition of the story I had a foreword written by, I think, William F. Nolan, who was like the author or co-author or whatever of a very famous sci-fi book, Logan's Run, that was adapted into a pretty famous movie, which I have not read or watched, but that's a separate issue. But I hear it's pretty good. But anyway, I had a foreword by him, and he also included at the end his screen treatment, which he wrote after this movie came out. It was when the studio was shopping around the movie that would ultimately become John Carpenter's version of the movie. But what cracked me up, though, was Nolan, like, as far as I could tell, with no irony, wrote that he thought his screen treatment was better than what Carpenter ended up putting up on screen, which is hilarious after you read the screen treatment, because it's absolutely awful. I will say, I think I like, and of course, it's really hard to say from a screen treatment, you know, that's basically like an outline, a glorified outline of what would ultimately become a script in a movie. But his, like a 50-page screen treatment, I think this version is better than whatever that was, because he basically turned the movie into like these aliens that like basically hopped from body to body, and then when they would leave the body, it would just leave like an empty husk or something. But the aliens were just trying to recover their spaceship or something. And I don't know. I'll talk more about it next week, but it was ridiculous. And at least this movie, the alien is a lot more threatening, and, you know, like poses one of the big things about the story, right, is that it poses a global threat. Like, if we don't, if it escapes here, it will destroy humanity. And they do retain that here with the idea of like, it's basically a plant, and all of it's got to do is spread its seeds, and each little seedling will become a 8-foot
monster,
superhuman monster. And although it's not as effective as the shape-shifting storyline, they still retain that, and I think that was smart of them.
Yeah, in that you couldn't tell who's the alien, so you were just doomed.
But anyway, but yeah, C+. I think it's a fine 50 sci-fi flick. It's nothing more, nothing less than that. But anyway, Andrew, we got a lot to talk about. All right, let's start with. Well, we'll save G-Fest for last. Let's start. There was a new Godzilla Minus Zero trailer since last week talked. And again, I had to say I was a little disappointed because it's just another teaser trailer. It's not a full-length trailer or anything, which honestly I could go without seeing a trailer. I'd love to go in like as blank as possible.
Yeah.
But to release another 30-second teaser that really doesn't show anything new, it confirms that it's, I think, 2 years later, right? the cast is returning, the main cast from the last movie. They're trying to build, and I think it says it basically does confirm that they're gonna drop a nuke on Godzilla in this movie. That's what I've gathered from it, and it probably superpowers Godzilla to new heights. Maybe it creates another monster that Godzilla will fight, a yet unidentified antagonist.
Maybe it separates Godzilla into
Maybe
two.
it blows Godzilla in two, and now there are two Godzillas. That is a possibility. That is a possibility. Now there are two of them. But, I mean, really doesn't show much, so we won't spend a whole lot of time talking about it unless you had something else to say about it.
No, really. That's about everything that showed the
There
trailer.
is about it, yeah. On sad news, a guy that we've discussed on this podcast a couple times, Sam Neill, Dr. Alan Grant himself.
You might know him from a famous movie.
Yeah, Jurassic Park. We did review the Jurassic Park franchise. He passed away kind of unexpectedly. You know, he had been battling bone cancer for a long time and finally beaten it. His body was, you know, supposedly clear of it, but I guess all the
strain,
the chemotherapy and all the radiation treatments, you know, that destroys your immune system. And I think he ended up basically dying of pneumonia. It's very sad. But yeah, he was a great actor. You know, I haven't seen all of his work. I need to go watch more of it. But of course, Alan Grant is what he will always be known for. And we reviewed those movies. You can go back and listen to our reviews of those. He was, of course, I've seen Possession. I've seen Event Horizon.
Omen
3. I think it was Omen 3 that he was in. Of course, The Hunt for Red October is one of his big ones.
Yeah.
It's been a while now, but I did see that vampire movie he made with like Willem Dafoe or whatever, where like the vampires ruled the planet and the humans were the minority and whatever. I don't even remember what it's called, Daybreakers or something. But he, you know, very prolific actor, was a great actor, and we will be talking about him. I don't know if it will be his final film role, but it definitely one of his final film roles will be Godzilla Kong Supernova. So we will be reviewing him this spring. So that will be kind of bittersweet. But yeah, so sad day. R.I.P. Sam Neill. But Andrew, we took a big trip last weekend. Well, weekend before last by the time this podcast comes out. But so let's talk about it. Let's talk about G-Fest. Did you have a good time at G-Fest this year?
Oh, I enjoyed G-Fest as always.
Yeah, so we flew in. I mean, just to kind of recap our trip, we flew in Wednesday afternoon. I had plans to go shopping, the mile strip and all that, but we ended up not doing that because I was just tired. But
yeah,
outside of the festival, we did, or convention, we did go. We hit up a few spots. We hit up Shed's Aquarium, which was cool, a little pricey for what it was, I thought, but you know, whatever. It was okay. But we did hit the Field Museum, first time going there. That was really neat. It's a massive place, of course, kind of monster related, has a lot of dinosaur fossils.
Yeah.
Sue, most famously, the most complete known Tyrannosaurus Rex fossil, plus a lot of other ones. That was really neat. And then after the convention on Monday, before we flew home, we hit the Medieval Torture Museum. I mean, it's a little spot, but it was really neat, kind of interactive, and it's it got the kind of creepy atmosphere vibe, and that was a lot of fun. And then we hit the Art Institute, which again is massive. You could literally get lost in there, and I wouldn't want to wander around there with the lights out. Andrew was rushing me because he was afraid we were going to miss our flight, but
we almost did.
But we did not anywhere close. But
we were there an hour early.
Anyway, I think we saw most of it though. Yeah. That was really neat. We may go back if we have time next trip around. But to the convention itself, so we did a lot of fun stuff. Of course, we went Thursday. We missed the first double feature on Thursday because I wanted to run around Chicago. But we did hit the second double feature Thursday night. We saw King Kong 76 for its 50th anniversary. They screened it. That was neat. And then Gamma vs. Zegra, which I had just rewatched here recently at home. It is what it is. But fun to watch with an audience, I guess.
Yeah.
So that was fun. At the convention, I didn't do this last year, but I did this year. I hit up the autograph room. I got Koji Moritsugu's autograph. Of course, Dan Moriboshi, Ultra 7. That's what he's famous for. Nice old man. And that was fun. I got a picture and an autograph from him. And then Megumi Kobayashi, she plays Mole in the Roberta Mothra movies. She's very nice. Got a picture and an autograph with her.
Mm-hmm. We even watched the panel.
We went to the panels. I will say, and of course he's 83 years old.
Yeah.
The panel with Koji Moritsuka was a little bit awkward. Like, he basically gave a one-sentence answer to all the questions. I don't know if him and the translator were completely vibing.
No.
A little awkward. Sometimes they had to have a third person. I think one of his I say handlers. I don't know if that may be a derogatory term, but one of his people also trying to translate sometimes, because I just don't think he was really understanding a lot. And like I said, he's old. Maybe he's not fully. He said, I don't remember a lot.
Yeah.
But maybe he actually doesn't. He is getting up there in age. I'm sure he's probably talked about all these things like 100 million times. He probably gets sick of answering some of these questions. Not that he was ever really rude about it, but it was a little awkward. But it was fun because they gave him like the little glasses, the little prop, and he did stand up and do the transformation bit, and that was fun. But then Megumi Kobayashi, we said on her panel, she's much more lively.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of fun listening to her interview and talking about, like, she did KFC commercials when she first got into acting, and that was funny, and just talking about making the movies and, how they were really separated from the rest of the cast, because pretty much for the entire shoot, they were like up on her and her co-star were up on a little platform that was Fairy. It was supposed to be Fairy in a green room the whole time and pretending to react to stuff. And that was kind of fun. But we did that. Didn't do a whole lot of panels, not as many as I'd like to, because there was just other stuff going on. We did say that probably my favorite panel, honestly, was the 20 years of Ifukube, 20 years since his passing. And the guy got up there, and he was kind of musically trained, and he talked about
that was a good one.
Compared and contrasted Ifukube to like Western composers, especially of the time, like Goldsmith and Williams. It cracked me up. Kind of went on a rant about how Hans Zimmer and his proteges are ruining modern film music.
Yeah, I was like, man,
you're brave. There's a lot of Zimmer fans, but
he was just going on. He was like, he's good, but he's ruining music.
That was kind of funny. I did enjoy that one. Did we sit in? We sit in on part of one where they were trying to do like a movie tournament.
Yeah,
but I kind of got bored of it and we left. And no offense to whoever was doing the tournament, but I think that's about all that we did in terms of the panels. I think we sit in on the 60th anniversary of Ultraman.
Yeah.
One, and we said on, and that was interesting. We sit in on the 60th anniversary of the dub of Godzilla, the original Godzilla, right? Looking at monsters. So that was interesting. But
we also went to the film room.
We did the film festival a few times. In fact, let me go to my letterbox. I letterboxed all the movies that we watched. So if you're interested, you can check me out on my letterbox at AWC3097. My profile picture is the Godzilla -1 poster. But anyway.
Yeah. So, they were not very highly rated on the letterbox.
No, so here's what we watched. So we watched a movie called... the first one we watched, not at the Pickwick, but at the actual film festival. We watched Lucy and the Lake Monster, which the director, God bless him,
he was there.
I hope he didn't fly in like just for that, because that would have been really sad. Because he flew in and he came in. He talked a little. He showed up like right before it started, so he didn't have much time. But
I think they were a little late.
He was it seemed a little frazzled, but he spent a couple minutes talking about the movie and everything. But anyway, it's called Lucy and the Lake Monster. Like I said, I kind of felt bad for him because I think when he first showed up, there may have been like 8 people there.
Yeah.
And then by the time the movie ended, I think there were maybe like me and Andrew and maybe a couple other people besides him still in the audience.
I think we're the only ones that didn't interchange people, that didn't come in.
That didn't come in the middle. Yeah. They actually said through the whole thing. So I kind of felt bad for him there. And again, I really appreciate it. I mean, it's not, it was made on a micro budget. It was basically just him and, I mean, he's made a few movies, but, just him shooting it with a very small cast and crew. He did the directing. He was the star. He was the composer.
He did everything almost.
but it wasn't good. It was a bad movie. It was basically.
Sorry if you're listening to this.
I'm sorry if you're listening to this, sir, but it was basically like a movie you would be shown at Sunday school at church.
Yeah.
It was a faith-based movie, basically, and it was about this grandpa. It's based on a book, I think, loosely based on a real story that I think the teacher, who was also with him at the screening, who also plays the teacher in the movie, but I think the teacher wrote a book based on one of her students' lives or whatever. But anyway, about a grandpa, and he's raising his granddaughter because his daughter has died, and his daughter was obsessed with finding Champ because they lived on Lake Champlain or whatever. And, Champ is like the American version of Nessie or whatever.
Yeah.
And so now him and his granddaughter go out and look for Champ. But the movie's not really about looking for Champ. The movie's about, like, coming to terms with your mother passing away in the church and all of this. But, I mean, it's very amateur. And if the director wouldn't have been sitting right behind us, I'd have probably got up and walked out. I felt bad for the guy.
And then after we left, he was like, "Thank you."
He's like, "Thanks for watching." I was like, "Oh, it was good," even though it wasn't. The second thing we watched, a movie called Den Ace Chaos. So I didn't know about Den Ace before we went and watched it, but apparently it's been a quote unquote franchise since like '89. It started as a short in '89, an 8-minute short, which I think they basically replay in its entirety at the beginning of this movie. And it's basically one of those like low budget parodies of like tokusatsu, like specifically like Ultraman.
And then, then they got the cast together again.
Yeah. And I think he's done various shorts throughout the years. I don't know if this is the first feature length one, but here's what I'll say. I thought that the 8-minute short at the beginning was actually pretty funny.
Yeah.
Just the basic concept is like there's Den Ace, and there's like there's a bunch of brothers, just like Ultra Brothers. There's a bunch of brothers. They say there's 70. I think we only meet like 5 or 6. But there's a bunch of brothers, and they all can transfer into Den Ace. But the
brothers and sisters, right?
And sisters, I guess. Did they say sisters? I don't know if they ever said sisters. I think they just said brothers. But anyway, the conceit is like in order to transform, each one of them has to do a unique thing that makes them happy. So in the original one, like the original short, like nudity made him happy. So they'd had to show him like a nudity magazine or something. And then he could transform into Den Ace. And then there was one of them that like he loved to kick. So he had to do like 100 kicks in 5 seconds or something. And then there was one of them that was a running gag, probably the funniest running gag through the movie, that he had to sing a classic song in its entirety. Yeah. Like a classic pop song in its entirety before he could transform into Den Ace. And like I said, there were funny elements, especially if you're fans of tokusatsu, and the way they satirized some of that stuff was funny. But the problem was, again, really low budget. Yeah. It was nearly 2 full hours, which was way too long for the concept and the money that they had. Yeah. And again, no real plot. It was just like a series of sketches. And so it was really hard to follow. Yeah. And it kind of got old pretty quickly. So I wouldn't recommend watching it, but I would maybe recommend hunting down that original 8-minute short because it was kind of funny.
What else did we do?
Then we watched Shocktopus. One of those, like, I thought it was an Asylum movie. Not an Asylum movie, an independent production, but Asylum type thing. Yeah. It's terrible, but it was kind of terrible in a fun way, especially we had a pretty big audience watching it. And I think the Shocktopus was mostly AI, which, you can have your little gripes with that or whatever if you want. But just watching it with an audience and, kind of doing the old classic, like yelling at the screen thing. Yeah. That was kind of fun. I kind of had fun watching it, even though it objectively is an absolutely terrible movie. Then we did some shorts. Tyrannosaurus Rex was a little short. They recreated this, it was a throwback to the silent era. Yeah. I thought it was fine. I mean, they redid the silent era thing. They did literally with the aspect ratio, the sepia tones, the inner titles telling you what they're saying, the musical score, and then they did stop motion dinosaurs, which you discovered at the end were not real, but I thought it was fine. I thought it worked for what it was. Yeah. A real short, like a 5-minute short called Fish Tales. Again, same concept, recreating the silent era with a little stop animated like Nessie like dinosaur thing. Again, it was fine for what it was. like a little 25 minute short called Ayura. It was the world premiere, I believe, of it. More modern. It had like a CGI or AI. I'm not exactly sure which. Like giant sweet fish that came alive and destroyed the city. And then this girl had to get into her mech and fight it.
Yeah.
It was pretty fun. The director was there and he watched the screening with us.
Yeah, and he was saying stuff all up
At the end,
credits.
when the credits are rolling and the directing credit popped, he's like, "That's me."
That's me.
That was funny. And then I think that was it. And then at the Pickwick, we watched We watched King Kong, Godzilla vs. Zero, and then a little bit of an episode with the Roberta Mothra screening on Sunday.
Yeah.
They literally just hooked up the DVD player, the projector. But because it's in the wrong aspect ratio, it was cutting off the subtitles.
Yeah.
So at first they tried just moving the image up, which then cut off the top, quarter of the image. So then they came out and they were like, well, the aspect ratio is wrong. So we can either cut off the subtitles or cut off the top of their heads, or we could switch over to the dub and just kind of put it in the middle. And we were all like, let's just do the dub.
Mm-hmm.
So they played the dub, which, if I was a real completionist, I wished like the films that they got for this, Toho would send over the film prints and they could just actually show the original, film prints. But that's probably asking too much. So
yeah, you know how much Toho probably asks for those.
probably a ridiculous amount. But whatever. But yeah, so that's what we did at G-Fest. We hit the dealer's room a lot. We got some t-shirts, got a Funko Pop.
Got some figures.
I got some little keychain thing and
I got a King Ghidorah and a Mecha Godzilla
action figure thing.
action figure.
Yeah, so that was fun. I got The Last Dinosaur on DVD. We'll be reviewing that.
Mm-hmm.
They had a panel on the 50 years of The Last Dinosaur. I'd never heard of it before then. We didn't go to the panel. We didn't have time. And I didn't want to ruin the movie before I saw it. But I added that to the schedule. We'll be watching that. And then we went to, of course, the art gallery, the artist's alley or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we bought anything there, but they had some neat stuff. I thought about it. I thought about it. One cool thing, of course, we went to the art gallery where like the people display their art.
Mm-hmm.
That was neat. There was one like a big like mural of Mothra that was really neat. Like a wood, someone had done a wood burning where they took like a log of wood and then like burned the drawing into the wood, and then I forgot what word I was looking for, but anyway, it was really neat.
Mm-hmm.
And some other art that was really neat, and then the model display room, really neat. Some really cool models.
Oh yeah,
this one like that this guy had made was like a whole diorama with like giant models of the kaiju, like a Ghidorah. I think probably had like a 6-foot wingspan on it. It was a big model. That was really neat to see, and then some Godzilla like heads and stuff, and
some other things that people
some other
made.
stuff that was really neat. So all that was a lot of fun. So yeah, we stayed in the Hyatt this year in the hotel with the convention. So we just had to go down in the elevator, so that was fun.
Up and down,
up and down. That was fun. But so had fun again. Long ways off, but I plan to go again next year.
Oh yeah.
And so anything else to add?
I think that's pretty much it for this week.
All right. Well, had a lot of fun.
Oh, yeah.
I've added a few things to the schedule coming up for our viewing pleasure. Of course, the next 2 weeks we'll continue on The Thing. We'll be doing John Carpenter's The Thing, and then that 2011 movie called The Thing as well. And then I've added, I forget in which order, but I've added, so we got, after The Thing, we're going to be doing The Water Horse, Legend of the Deep. Rogue, which is a crocodile movie. Dark Age, which is a crocodile movie. Monster from the Ocean Floor. The Food of the Gods and its sequel. The Great Alligator River.
We're doing a lot of alligator and crocodile movies this year.
Yeah. Then Bats, and then our October Spectacular, The H-Man, Secret of Taligian, The Human Vapor. The new Netflix Human Vapor, which is out on Netflix right now if you want to check it out. Or you can wait for us to review it in October, and we'll be checking that out. Some movie called Beginning of the End, which I don't even remember what that was about. And Godzilla Minus Zero, and then the new edition, The Last Dinosaur, the Shinkalion movie with the Ice Godzilla. I'm going to be totally lost as to what's happening, but we're going to watch it because it's made the circles in the fandom. And then I finally got in from SRS Cinema, Brush of the God, which we'll be reviewing.
Watching that.
So get excited for all that. But as far as this week goes, I think that's it. Don't forget that you can contact us on thisway1954@gmail.com.
You can find our website at www.tomthisway.wordpress.com.
That's right. And you can also find us on social media on X, Instagram, and Facebook. I did put a couple of the photos from G-Fest on our Instagram story, so you can find that there. And again, next week will be John Carpenter's The Thing. And as always, I'm Aaron.
Nah, I'm Andrew.
And we will see you next time.